Welcome to the Exponential Australia Church Leaders Podcast.
Hello, Exponential Australia. It's so lovely to have you with us today as we've been hearing from a wide range of leaders who have an interest in church planting, seeing multiplication in the Australian church all across the tribes and denominations, both within Australia, but also as we have been hearing from leaders around the globe as well. And today we are so blessed to be joined by Tim and Victoria Giovenelli, who lead Manly Life Church on Sydney's Northern Beaches, which has been a church that has been planted now for 10 years, but has just seen incredible things happen over those 10 years. And also as they have a heart for further church planting in the area and beyond as well. And so, Tim and Tori, we are so glad to have you guys with us today.
Oh, really grateful to be here. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Charlie.
And for those who haven't met Tim before, you're about to find out that he's quite the character. So I look forward to the next 20 minutes as we talk.
Oh, geez, no pressure.
But hey, guys, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your journey in life and ministry? What has led you to leading Manly Life and planting Manly Life? Just give us a bit of a sketch of who you guys are.
You want to go first?
Sure. Well, we both grew up in the same suburb in Sydney, a suburb called Pymble. And we never met till we were 30. Mm-hmm. And then we met at 30 and got married within that year. And we both had reasonably similar stories. You know, in my 20s, I kind of spent 6 years overseas, year in Africa with African Enterprise, great organization. And then I was in London for 2 years. We'll talk a bit about that later, but that's where I went to one of HDB, the Alpha Course churches. I went to one of their church plants just down the road from them, and then went to Regent College in Vancouver for a couple of years to do Bible college, back to my church in London to get trained up, and then kind of sent in one sense to Sydney to church plant. And your story was somewhat similar.
Yeah, a little bit similar. I am a high school teacher, teaching dance and drama, as well as church planting. And I'd also spent a bit of time in Mozambique with Iris Ministries at their orphanages and loved it. Have lots of great friends still over there. And I'd ended up through a series of just God events, taking 5 months off to do a School of the Heart with Catch the Fire in Toronto. And that was an amazing experience, really formational for me. And I left there, actually stayed for 2 years and did an internship at a church there. Came home thinking I'd head back overseas and keep sort of doing what I'd been doing. Met this guy and landed a job here in Sydney, which was kind of really perfect for me and felt like God was in it as well. And then we ended up church planting, and I'd always said I'd never church plant. So good times.
It's a very common story, guys. You know, those who have said they would never church plant, but God who, had other plans and all that.
Yeah. When you can pick that stream,
yeah.
You can pick that stream at college, I was always like, oh, not interested. I'll do whatever else is on offer.
I love that. And tell us about the journey then of Manly Life. How did that come into conception? How did that all come about? Would love to hear more about that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, we got married. I'd planted an evening service at a church up in Crow's Nest that was kind of coming to an end. And we felt called to do something together. I think that was a big part of it. It's hard to kind of get married and stay in the same church. So, I had always just loved the Manly area. Whenever I kind of felt needed a break, I would head down Military Road, down to Manly and kind of exhale and feel like I was home. Yeah. And when we met, Victoria was living on the Northern Beaches.
Yeah, yeah.
So we got married, and it all happened relatively quickly. Within 6 months, I guess, we were launching a new church in Manly. Our denomination had struggled in the area. We're a Baptist church. North Manly Baptist Church had closed. There was a small missional church in the old Manly Baptist Church that was struggling. And so, there was a real sense in which there was a space there to try and get some new ministry started, a new church established.
Yeah, it was really great. We sort of met. It was a very whirlwind romance, and I think at one point, I was like, "Oh God, this is happening really fast." Wedding date, and then I really felt the Lord speak to me in the time of worship. it was amazing. He kind of gave me this date we were going to get married. Poor Tim hadn't proposed, but I think God was just preparing my heart. But then also in one moment, I felt like, oh, this is all happening quite quickly. And I really felt like the Lord said 6 months from now, you'll understand why so soon. And it was really 6 months after we got married, this opportunity came to pass in Manly to church plant together. And I was like, oh, being married and being able to launch into that. It was really amazing experience to do together.
Oh, amazing. And one of the questions I love to ask church planters and those who have planted churches is talk to me about like the moment in your heart or the calling that you received that kind of almost put you in that place of, Lord, you're calling us to obedience in planting a church. I love hearing that moment where for people that became a real opportunity to step into.
Sure. I mean, probably a couple of markers for me. I mean, one, I think I caught the vision of church planting when I was living in London, having seen HTB plant, at that time, 15 years ago, dozens of churches around London, and just seeing these old buildings come alive with new congregations. And prior to that, when I was just at uni studying business, I'd often wake up in the middle of the night with dreams about church planting. So for me, it was probably more of a long-term thing.
One day I found this document we were cleaning out. There was this old typed up document, and I was like, Tim, what's this? He's like, I woke up in the middle of the night and God just gave me this download for planting a church in Sydney one day. I think you were in Africa maybe at the time. And he typed it all out about what this church, and church planting wasn't on his radar at all at that time. He was in the early 20s. And so obviously seeds really sown in his life and heart in regards to church planting. Yeah.
And I think, I'm the kind of guy who, I'm not so much into maintenance. I like pioneering. I like evangelism. I like seeing ministries get established. So for me, it kind of fitted with my sense of calling of, wanting to see an expression of the kingdom of God get established in this area.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. As I'm listening to you, I'm kind of getting this sense that it was some of like the water that you were swimming in. Like that was kind of that's an environment that was around you that went, oh yeah, I'm going to church plant one day, and I guess that's some of Exponential's hope and prayer for the Aussie church, where that would be a priority in lots of environments where younger leaders would go, oh yeah, I could potentially church plant one day. And so
yeah, well, I think we saw that with these guys in London. Is it just became their nature to raise up leaders, send them out, equip them so they're not going to fail. In one sense, what I saw with the HTB church plants is they gave it every shot of being able to be a success. They would send big, healthy teams. We might talk about the model stuff later, but I love the fact that that they sent a worship pastor, an administrator, a kids worker, so that in one sense, day one of the church being established, it was able to function as a church and reach its community, not just like a niche small group of like-minded people at similar life stage, but be a functioning church almost from day one.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the things I've loved about hearing about particularly the Baptists in New South Wales is that blended ecology approach, that in certain areas that necessitates a church like that, and for other areas there might be the need for smaller or micro, but actually for the full breadth of God's church to be expressed in a certain area. And I guess my next question for you guys is, particularly as you sensed that call, as you started that journey, tell us about the last 10 years. How did you arrive where you are today? Like you mentioned model there, Tim. Like, talk to me about how you guys landed upon your certain approach to ministry and how you've gone about planting in Manly.
Yeah, I think, I think just one little bit about like that pioneering stuff, at least for me, was, I definitely didn't have church planning on the horizon. So it was hard in that initial to imagine, okay, well, I was something I'd never thought of before, to then suddenly go, what do I think about church planning? And God, what does this look like? And that was probably a very different process for me than you, but I definitely had that pioneer. So when I came back from ministry school, the first thing I did was plant a house of worship and plant a little prayer house with my local church in a shopping centre. And I do a lot of pioneering in my school teaching as well. So there's that pioneering edge to it, which helps you, I think, with the dreaming. But we definitely had, do you want to talk about spirit, word, action as our foundation?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd captured a bit of a vision for the kingdom being expressed through a church that's fully alive in the things of the spirit, fully alive in the word of God, and fully alive in local action in the community, concern for the poor, what's that kind of soul survivor type values or alpha type values. But so that was the kind of church we wanted to plant. And then, I guess the mechanics was we wanted to, get a core team together, and there was a bunch of people living down this area. We met a guy who became kind of our worship leader at a wedding, and he came on board with his wife, and one of your students who was at uni became a bit of a kids worker for us. So we tried to launch with a bit of a bang. I guess some of the mechanics of it was we didn't want to get stuck in the living room. We wanted to be a church that almost from day one was ready to accept, the broad community into the family of the church.
Yeah.
It's been lots of ups and downs. I think, we've the last 2 years has been tough with COVID, but one of the blessings was we inherited a building, the old Manly Baptist Church, from the denomination. But prior to that, I think we had 6 or 7 venues in 7 years,
it was massive.
including getting kicked out of some, and kind of, we would literally be texting the church on a Friday night, telling them where church would be on a Sunday.
We never didn't have somewhere to be, but it was fun. It was exciting. It was exciting times. That was a good season. But I think of those spirit, word, action, that was really there in that initial seed of planting, and it has stayed there. It's still very much who we are, I would say. And even in that lead up to planning, we would get a lot of words about, whenever people gave us prophetic words, it was always this marrying together of spirit and word, and what we were going to do. So that, I feel like, was such an arrowhead for us in what we felt, the vision of what we were called to build. And it's something we've always held really dearly and treasured. And even in our choices in church planting, I think when there's so much you can do, there's so many different ways you can do ministry in church. So it can be a bit overwhelming. You kind of get excited, let's do everything. But I think one of the things I really appreciated that we did in those initial planting weeks and months and year even, was we said we just want to do what we feel God's calling us to do, and do that really, really well. Right. So we kept things really simple. We were like, okay, what's the essence of what we're being called to? That's what that looks like practically. And then, because you get lots of people in your ear, oh, why don't you do this? And why don't you do this? And we should start this and we should start that. But we were really, I think we just held really firm to nope, this is what we feel we're meant to do. And we're just going to actually do that one thing really well, and then slowly build on that.
Yeah. It's funny, as you guys were talking, you almost get that sense of exhilaration about those early stages of planting the church. It's an adventure. We're doing something together. We're breaking new ground. It's that pioneering spirit that you were speaking about. And you kind of, you feel like you want that for the whole church, because all churches can fall into that rut occasionally, but there's something about pioneering that brings about that exhilaration of doing something with Jesus. And it's a great adventure, isn't it?
Yeah, and you're trying to, gather people and see people won to the Lord, and, get Sunday services off the ground. And, and we had those little breakthrough moments when we went from, we started with an evening service, and we had families saying, we want to join in with what you're doing, but we just can't do evenings. And I remember the church had grown to such a size that we were ready to multiply into 2 services. And then that was a big moment, because we launched on an Easter Sunday, the morning service, and families started to flock in, and more staff got added. And that's some of the mechanics of church planning is some things just take time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how about you guys share just a bit about, you've mentioned some of your influences by way of each of your journeys, being in London, being in Toronto and in Africa. Who would you point to as well as other kind of key influences by way of some of your journey? Maybe whether it's literature you've read or people that you've been inspired by, that have helped Manly Life be what Manly Life is today?
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes joke that we're kind of a vineyard church in a Baptist body. So, I mean, I think, both of us will be very influenced by John Wimber and the vineyard, and kind of hence prayer ministry at the end of services. Victoria runs a thing called the restoration course, which is, kind of about inner healing and just making sure that people, deal with family of origin stuff and past hurts and forgiveness. And so, there's that kind of, I think if you came from a vineyard background, you'd see familiar stuff in how we do church. And then for me, obviously the HTB background with Alpha courses and that desire to kind of be a church plant that then plants other churches, raising up other leaders, and just seeing how, Nicky Gumbel and my pastor was a guy called Simon Downham in London, just very releasing of people, not holding on to what you've got or trying to build a big mega church, but that desire to see kind of multiplication.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the same. John Arnott and probably some of those influences in Toronto were massive for me. I think I'd really gone there with a head knowledge about God, and I'd say what happened to me there was I had a real encounter of relationship and transformation of the heart, spiritual formation that was huge in my life. So when I came out of there, my heart for ministry was I'd encountered God's love in such an incredible way that it changed me so dramatically that I wanted, I guess, to just be a part of other people encountering that love of God. And I'd say in church planning, you kind of need those, you need to have fresh encounters. You need to be connected with God's voice and his heart and his word. Because sitting in his love is what, I guess, for me personally, sustains me in church planning. Every time we get a little moment where someone encounters his love, whether it's through the teaching or through a worship song or whatever, that's what sustains you. Those moments of encounter with Jesus and the Father heart, I guess, was huge for me, that Father heart teaching. So that's influenced a lot, I think, of, I guess, how I approach ministry and planting. And
I think the influence, one of the guys I really liked was Mike Norris, who planted St. Paul's Auckland. He's gone back to the UK now. You probably play their Christmas kids video every year at your churches. And Mike was a dear friend of mine particularly when he was in Auckland, and probably a similar journey to him. Our church is big enough now that we could easily not do welcome well. We could not we would not have to do any more evangelism, and we would not have to rely on the Spirit, right? You could just kind of do great contemporary worship and schmick services. And that was one of the things that Mike always encouraged, is you just got to stay on those three things. Keep folding in new people as they arrive and new believers. Keep on evangelism. You've got to keep that edge to the church that's always for the outsider and those who don't know the Lord. And the Spirit stuff. It's very easy to replace the Spirit with schmickness. And you want to kind of every so often, for us, we have these monthly worship and prayer nights where it just goes a bit wild. Where we encourage prophecy and prayer ministry and inner healing stuff, and for us we want to keep those edges to our church plant. Otherwise, I think it would grow stale.
Just creating space. I guess it's been creating space for God to move. I think that's interesting. We've been influenced just recently. I'm going to mess up his name. I'm going to say it wrong. The book that we all just read.
Oh, Peter Scazzaro.
I'd say
you got us onto him, Charlie, originally.
I feel like we're a bit
emotionally
late.
Healthy discipleship.
I meant to bring the book for this interview. Actually, I feel like we're a bit late to the party on that, but we actually did his leadership, emotionally healthy discipleship with our team, and all our team said, "Oh, I wish we'd done this years ago." So I'd say if you're thinking of church planning or your young leadership team, jump on his stuff. It's just brilliant as well, I think, for helping sustain you through the ups and downs of it all.
Absolutely. And I think Scazzaro is a master of that, but also something that you kind of mentioned before, Tori, around unless we're keeping the flame burning within our own heart for Jesus, we can very easily miss Jesus in ministry unless we're careful,
Yes.
And I think that's a great word for any planter or even any leader in church ministry. A couple more questions that I want to throw your way as we begin to wrap up our time. And this is a bit of a highs and lows question. What's been some of the great highs and joys for you guys in planting? And then equally on the flip side, some of the struggles and moments that you've really had to strengthen yourself in the Lord, you know?
Yeah. You know, funnily enough, I feel like some of the joys have been through moments where there's actually a great hardship, or there's a family that's going through suffering, and to watch the community come together, which is kind of weird because it's a low, but it's a high. Yeah. Like, I think there's moments, we've had a few services where something's been going on and the whole community on a Sunday has just like wept in prayer. And, you know, and actually like that's been like an amazing.
You realize you're a family.
You realize the connections that have formed through this thing that God's built, and the depth of just connection that runs in your family. There have been some really beautiful services that have happened when that's happened.
And seeing adults come to faith. You know, I think we all know that teenagers and uni is really where people come to faith, but it's lovely when you see adults come to faith. And you know, we took a wedding a year and a half ago, and there was a lady who, you know, walked into one of our services a bit hungover from the night before, and she was a big partier in Manly and just hadn't ever been to church in her life, and someone invited her along.
Wow.
And she hasn't left since. You know, she came to faith, did Alpha, has then helped on every Alpha course.
Helps every course.
And she met a guy, he then did Alpha and came to faith. Yeah. We're at the wedding, and one of her friends just said, "You have no idea the difference that this lady coming to faith, the difference it's made in her life from what she was to what she is now." And I think that's the kind of stuff where sometimes in the grind of, we've still got to fill in rosters. We've still got to make sure that the kettle's boiled and the seats are out and the lights are on. You know, ministry has just mundane stuff, right? But I love the stories of people who really deeply get converted. Their lives are transformed by the gospel. And then you get to continue going on that journey with them. I think in terms of struggles, for me, because I'm such a relational guy, the area that we've planted in Manly is very transitory. Like, people move in and move out. A lot of international students or international workers. So I've kind of been saying to the church, even in the last 3 months, we've lost over 8 or 9 families who've moved out of the area. And that just, I think that takes a toll. I remember early on for you, you know, you really invested in some people. We're not having a go at you, these people. But then they moved to America.
They moved back to the US, or, you know, so I think that's hard. Like, you know, you invest, you're doing and your life, but I think that's part of the privilege too, that you get people for a season and you do life with them. And it can be hard to then say goodbye, but you just know that you just have to trust that you've been a part of something that God's been doing in them. But that can be hard.
And then for us, it then means, you know, the new family walk through the door, or someone comes to our playtime thing and comes to church. It's like, here we go again. You know, we've got to make room at the table and make sure their experience of local church is incredible.
Love that. Oh, that's awesome, guys. My last question for us today is particularly it's twofold, but what would you say firstly to the person or the couple or the team that might be beginning to sense, is the Lord leading us to plant a church? Like, if you could have your time again, what might you change? And then I guess on the flip side of that, to the Australian church, which I know is a very audacious thing, but if you could give a word to the Australian church, encouraging them in the ways of multiplication and church planting, what might you say?
I think to young leaders, I'd say, there's got to be a strong sense of calling to this. It shouldn't be a default thing because nothing else has worked. You can't find a path through someone. You know, church planting really is a calling. And the other thing I'd say is, like, you know, analyze your life. Like, have you led some ministries that have been fruitful? If you've never seen anyone come to faith through personal evangelism or through your preaching, then it might not be for you. You know, one of the things that I did when I was at my church in London is I led a young adults community life group that multiplied a group into 2 groups into 3 groups, and before you knew it, there was about 50 young adults meeting midweek. And there was a sense in which I can pioneer. Now, you know, it's the Lord who enables everything, but there should be a sense in which there's a calling, there's been some fruitfulness, and you're able to gather people as well, and kind of envision them for a pioneering ministry. There's a lot of people who want to join in once it's all done and established. I'm sure you know that, Charlie. Once there's a thriving kids ministry, once there's a youth group, then we'll come and join. But you don't get many pioneers who want to go on that journey with you. So that'd be a couple of things I'd say to kind of younger people thinking about it.
I'd say as well, it can feel like you're starting so small and it's this huge thing. But I guess to the Australian church, I'd say church planting, and anything I've learned with working alongside Tim is, he doesn't have a heart to plant a huge mega church. He just wants to see lots of healthy local churches of a few hundred people that are doing life well, doing life deeply. Yeah. Jesus is known and they're serving, they're able to serve and be a part of it. So I think like for the Australian church, I think it would be amazing if we had a vision for that. For a church on, every street corner or in every suburb, there was a number of healthy churches, because our communities are full of thousands of people. We actually need thousands of churches. We need more just local, small, local, healthy churches. So I think, I think that's an encouragement too. Like, you don't have to go in with this big vision of, I don't know, I'm going to save the state or whatever. I don't think people do, but actually you just need to gather a few hundred people and love your local area, serve your local area, do life with those people well. And that's we need a lot more of that.
Absolutely.
Maybe one more thing I'd just say. I know Nikki touched on this in your interview with him the other day, but kind of part of our vision is we're keen to start an extension service in a little bit further away in the next year, which will turn into a church plan, and hopefully more of those across the northern beaches of Sydney. But I've just seen the way that they give away their best people rather than kind of trying to hold on to what they've got. And because then, people who haven't been being able to have a go at ministry get an opportunity. And then people who were, already doing stuff get to go pioneer something as well. So it's going to raise up more leaders. It's only going to be a good thing for the church if your laity get equipped to run alpha courses, to lead worship, to start kids ministries and, that kind of stuff. But it only happens by giving away. Yeah. And I think one of the things we always think is, when are you big enough to start giving away? But I think you've just got to start, right?
Absolutely.
So where we did our morning service, we grew because we created room. As you create room, as you multiply, you create room for growth.
Yeah, it's great. At some level, you've actually got to do it right. It can't just be a theory. It's got to be a practice. And so, guys, I so appreciate your time today. You guys have had some absolutely brilliant insights, and I just know that this conversation is going to bless many as they listen and consider all the Lord might be doing in and through them. And so, Tim and Tori, we really appreciate you both.
No, thanks for having us, Charlie. It's been fun.
Nice. I'm off to Hawaii on Monday, so no one email me if you got questions.
Thanks for listening. For more great resources, please head to our website at exponential.org.au.